it's time to get into the Baraza TV Chat Show. So you're very welcome. This is the first episode of the Baraza TV Chat Show. And today we're going to be talking about something very interesting, but very timely and very important for a gathering like the one that we're at today. All right? And I'm going to put the topic out there before I invite my guests on the show today to come and join me on the set. All right, and it's very simple. Maurice touched on a lot of different things when it comes to, you know, sort of crossing the line or blurring the lines between politics and activism, and especially when the activist becomes politician and the other way around, okay? So I'm going to just run you through the topic, and I want you to think about it, reflect on it before I even invite my panel up here. Is that okay? All right, so this is the topic. We're talking about movements and political power. Movements and political power. And these are the questions that I want you to just ruminate on as we're having the conversation, because you will be involved in it as well. One, what has our relationship with state power been? And by our, I mean us as activists and movements, as artivists and movements. What has our relationship with state power been? Has it been violent? Has it been smooth? Has it been fruitful? Has it been symbiotic? What has it been? Okay? And two, movement activists who take public office, what are the lessons? What are the costs? Are there contradictions? And if so, what are those contradictions? And are there inspirations for winning for our causes? So when the activist becomes politician, is it an inspiration for winning for our cause? Now our person is in the seat. He will do it, she'll do it. Our government is in power. Is that how we feel? So we're going to talk about some of these things. I'm going to invite my guest up here. Very first on the list, I have Simamkele Dlakavu, who is a feminist activist. Round of applause for her. And you can take the seat on the far end. It's yours to claim. Please clap for her until she takes her seat. We also have Boniface Mwangi, who is an activist, a photojournalist, an independent candidate for the parliament in Kenya. A round of applause for him. The stage is yours, and please, you can take your seat next to Simamkele. All right. And we also have Gift Ostallos Siziba, movement organizer and former opposition member in the Parliament of Zimbabwe. Round of applause as he takes the stage. All right. And you can sit right next to Boniface. Okay, there we go. Please, one more round of applause for them as we get into the conversation. I'm going to take my seat. I have permission to do that? Thank you. Oh, there's a third one? There's another one? Let me just, okay. Bo from Madagascar is here as well. Bo from Madagascar, are you here? Oh, my apologies. I did not overlook you intentionally. Please, round of applause, round of applause, round of applause. Okay, so the seat next to Gift is yours. The seat next to Gift is yours. Okay. No, yes, so yes. All right. Once again, your hands will get tired when I'm on stage. You keep clapping, so clap again. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, you're very welcome. How are we doing? You all have microphones. Let's test them very quickly before we go. There must be a microphone, so Bo, yours is here. Okay. Gift, do you have one next to you? Do you have one, Boniface? No, only one? Okay, so we'll share. It's fine. We'll share. It's okay. We're in the business of sharing here. So once again, you're welcome. You're welcome. Why do you look so tense? I mean, it's going to be a hard conversation, honestly. But it's a conversation we need to have. But I don't want you to feel tense. Because if you're tense, then I'll start feeling bad, and I don't want to feel bad. All right, but this is what we are talking about. All of you started off with the placards, with the passion of wanting to look for change in your communities, in your societies, in your countries, and on your continent. And at some point, you segued into politics. Now, this topic is very important for me personally, because as an activist, an artivist, a media professional who does a lot of activism in my work, a few years ago I decided, now I'm Ghanaian American, I was born in the US, and I decided, you know what, if I have the American passport, that blue passport, and it gives me the right to vote, then I'm going to mobilize here on the continent with other Americans, African Americans, so that we can use our vote. Because whatever happens, and we are seeing it, whatever happens in America affects us here, whether we like it or not. And in Ghana in particular, we have a lot of African Americans who come here and they don't want to have anything to do with the system. They just want to come, repatriate, heal, and move forward. But we can't do that, you know. And then secondly, in Ghana and living here, working here, activists, we tend not, we don't want to deal with government at all, a lot of the time, because they've burnt us too many times. But if we also do that, then we miss out on opportunity to effect policy or to influence it. And so personally, this is a very big conversation for me. So I'm going to start with you, Simamkele. Tell me, what was that moment where you said to yourself, you know what, I need to, not necessarily lay down the placard, but put it down just for a bit and get into politics? What was that moment for you? Is it on? Is it on? Okay, there we go.
Much better. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here in a room with fellow activists, comrades, and movement builders. My name is Simamkele. I'm based in South Africa at CAPSI, and I'm also a feminist activist. I'm not in politics. I've never held elective office, but I've mobilized in my country for state accountability. But I just want to firstly begin setting a context of this conversation and how I view this conversation. First of all, we cannot afford not to engage the state. We cannot afford not to contest the state and demand accountability. I say this because we need to remember our historical context. We need to remember that we are here today because of the anti-colonial struggle and the movements that mobilized for our freedom. When Nkrumah said, seek political power, he understood the role and the power of the state. Our foremothers and forefathers fought the colonialism because they saw the state as a pathway to justice, to dignity, and the provision of key social services such as healthcare and education. So we cannot afford to disengage the state. But I just want to highlight a few examples from my context in South Africa where movements demanded provisions from the state and actually won. The first one for me that comes to mind that is pivotal for our democracy was the Anti-Privatization Forum, the Treatment Action Campaign, and the Women's National Coalition, and more recently, the Fees Must Fall movement. So in the wake of South Africa's democracy, women saw that there was a repeating of a cycle. We saw in the continent, within the first few years of independence, that women were shut down or shut out of political institutions. And South African feminists, because we were one of the last few countries to gain independence in Africa, South African feminists and activists made sure that history would not repeat itself. They created the Women's National Coalition, and mobilized across class, across geographical location, to create what was called the Women's Charter. Today, South Africa, the principle of non-sexism and gender equality is embedded in our constitution because women dared to mobilize. And just briefly, also the Treatment Action Campaign mobilized in the streets, in the courts to ensure that ARVs would be freely available. And South Africa today runs one of the largest HIV treatment programs because movements dared to challenge the state and demand accountability and services.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Simamkele. You can give her a round of applause. You can go ahead. Now, so, basically your position is, as activists, as movements, we cannot afford not to engage the state. All right, so audience, please take note of that because I'll come to you on your thoughts and what that even means, engaging the state as a movement. Boniface, let me come to you. Now, I'm going to ask you a very frank question because I'm a very frank person. When you decided to get involved in the Parliament of Kenya, was it because you wanted to do more for the movement, or was purely ambition? Or both? And if both, please tell us the story there.
Wow. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, Frantz Fanon said that every generation must discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it, and I discovered mine. I ran for public office because I was tired of going to parliament and delivering petitions, and then they're being thrown in the dustbin. So I began a political party called Ukweli Party, the Truth Party, in 2016, and I ran for office in 2017. So I founded actually a political party that young people who are not corrupt, who think they can deliver and work for the people, could run on it. So it was never about ambition. It was vision, mission, and fulfilling my calling to life.
All right, wonderful. So let me stay with you. I see where you're coming from, but someone might say, fine, it wasn't about ambition. I was getting tired of seeing those, if the petitions even made it where they needed to make it in the first place, before they even got into the dustbin. Yes. I was tired of that. But did you not see any other pathway to getting the attention of the parliamentarians or the duty bearers who could fix the problem, apart from actually getting into active politics?
So I think after God and doctors, I think activists see themselves as gods. Because the work we do is thankless, and we still do it. And then we never think of fighting for political power. I think one of the things that I want us to come from out of this Baraza, as we go back home, we need to go back to our homes and agitate for political power. Because we are very good in organizing, like we did in Kenya during the Gen Z movement. We organize, mobilize, and make a statement. And then that political goodwill is stolen by politicians to get themselves re-elected or run for office. I think we need to turn our agitation to agitate for political power. If you look at the ANC or CCM in Tanzania, or KANU in Kenya, or ZANU-PF, all those were movements that were fighting for independence. And then when they won independence, they became the leaders. Okay, they have done very horrible things. But one thing they had that we don't have, they realized the only way to change a country is getting political power. And Yanama, I know there's some Yanama members here from Senegal, and that's what they did, and half of them are in government.
Where are the Yanama members? Where are you?
Where are you?
Yanama from Senegal, where are you?
There's one of them there.
A few, okay.
He's actually running for president.
I'll come to you.
So the thing is, I think the other thing we need to, so our donors like us because they fund us to do activities, and then you have outcomes, but they don't allow us to become political. I think we need to become political in everything that we do because politics affect our lives every single day. Our lives are in danger because of politics. So we need to actually fight for political power. If we're going to go back to our homes at the end of this week, let's go back and say, how do we take over our governments? We can't be helpless and pray and protest without a solution. So if there's a problem with our government and the government must come down, who gets to govern and how do we govern? That's how let us think in that particular way.
Okay, Boniface, let me stay with you for just a couple more minutes. Oh, you can give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
Okay. Before I come to Gift, so let me ask you, we need to be political,
yes.
right? Now, being political, does that mean, and having political power, and it's something I want the whole room to think about, does that mean actually taking a political office? Does it have to mean that, right? So that's one thing. And then the second thing to you, Boniface, how successful then were you? And, you know, after you got the political office, you know, and making sure that the petitions of Africa here didn't end up in the dustbin?
So I did not get into political office. I was able to raise an incredible, my campaign was funded by the people, so I raised over $200,000 from Kenyans. They gave me money, they gave me their time, they gave me cars, they gave me everything. My opponent spent $2 million to win that office. So, and he was a state candidate. But I was able to introduce to Kenyan politics a clean way of doing politics. So nowadays, even when people run for office, last time Raila Odinga ran for office, he had a pay bill number where people donate cash to him. I ran the most cleanest campaign that was applauded by everyone. I left civil society, ran for office, left the political party, came back as a clean person. No scandal, no issue, and it's possible for us to agitate for political power without becoming monsters. So just because our founding fathers betrayed the revolution and betrayed the people doesn't mean you're going to betray the people. So as we decide to run for office, let's know that it's possible to run a clean campaign, and it's also possible to be funded by the people. Give me 1 minute. Let me say this. One of the ways we were colonized by the British, Portuguese, Spanish, whoever colonized the country, the French, they came, they sent their missionaries, they lived in the community, built churches, and converted us. As activists, we live in the community. We work in the community. We need to turn around our funding model to ensure that the same way the missionaries came with nothing, the community built them a house, gave them money, gave them food, gave them everything, and they were able to run their missions in the continent. We need to run our activism funded by the local people. Let the local people own our voices. Let them fund our work. The same way they fund the church and the mosque. The money for mosque in my community or the church in the community doesn't come from Vatican or Saudi Arabia. The money comes from the community. We need our community to see the importance of our work and fund us. And once they own us, we'll take over. But as long as you have to come and write funding proposals to donors, we'll never liberate our continent because there's no ownership in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Boniface. Thank you. All right. Gift, let me come to you. Let me come to you, Gift. So, Gift, in your case, you did hold political office. Yes? Okay. But why do you look worried? Oh, relax, my brother, my comrade, relax. But what was it for you? Was it similar to things that Simamkele and Boniface have said, that you felt that it was just time to claim the power so you could do the work from that powerful place? Or, again, I'll ask, did you have president? It's okay if you want to be the president of it's okay. It's all right. So I just want to clarify that. Yeah.
No, thank you very much. I was groomed by the International Socialist Organization. So I grew up from radical left struggles. I was taught Fanon and Marxism when I was first year at university. So this is important in characterizing why I ended up joining a political movement, because in Zimbabwe, we had the labor-backed political movement, which was born out of the efforts of the left and the efforts of the civic society and the church in the country that founded the democratic movement in September 99. So I was an activist in Students' Union, and then in 2018, there was a transition within the democratic movement, and a new young leader came into power. And we drove the campaign then as activists without being directly involved in campaigning for public office. So we had a campaign, a social movement called Generational Consensus. Before then, we had launched hashtag Tajamuka, which was a radical youth-led movement that pushed more on Mugabe's end days of authoritarianism in 2017. And then at that time, when you directly interface with political parties, you then realize the importance of taking part, because our politics in the continent, when you interact with politicians, both within the ruling establishment and alternative movements, you will see that the death of ideas, the deficiency of the quality of leadership and the substance requires us who have invested so much time in understanding the critical values and also been connected to the organic day-to-day struggles of the people. So it became very essential for me, because I then realized that the democratic movement offered a platform for me to fully express the end of the revolution, because our day-to-day struggles have an objective, and that objective is freedom. And the political platform is important for us to occupy, because that is the central strategic objective of the National Democratic Revolution. It is freedom. So to attain that freedom, so I ran for office in 2023, became one of the elected young members of parliament. When we went into parliament...
Round of applause.
Thank you. When we were elected into parliament, the fascist regime, I mean, there is something very... When you move from Nigeria to Kenya to Ghana to Burkina Faso, you think you are in this one big house, just moving from one bedroom to another. The circumstances are fundamentally the same. Fascism rears its ugly heads on ordinary people the same way. So you think that Yahya Jammeh is the cousin of the next person, whether it is Tinubu, whether it is the Compaore in the Burkina before the military guys came in. You see that the situation is fundamentally the same. And when we went into parliament, the regime knew that we are there to push for business, because we had objective on one hand on the legislative agenda, but secondly on pushing back on authoritarian consolidation. I never stayed in parliament. I think they allowed me to stand up, and then they shut me down. I couldn't speak the first day. Then the second day I was chucked out, because the movement was, because detectors controlled the judiciary. So then they used the judiciary to remove us. I was never removed by my party. I was never removed by the people that voted for me. I went back to contest the same seat when I was removed, because it was vacant. They removed me from the ballot because they knew, and they know, even as I'm speaking today in Accra, they know that the old is dying and the new must be born. So, and we understood when we got there that it is going to be a marathon. It's not going to be a sprint. We understood that our objective is to change the concrete realities of the masses of our people. So we had to continue to fight, and that's why we're continuing. And lastly on that, just 2-3 days before I came here, I had a community meeting in my own constituency, because now there are 2 members of parliament. The de facto member of parliament, which is myself, because I hold the social contract with the people of my community, and the de jure one produced by the regime. So that's the same sentiment. And I was telling my brother in Kenya that we have to provide leadership, even if we are not occupying the legal offices of our country. We ought to provide leadership and change the realities of the suffering masses of our people. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Gifts. Thank you. And again, I'll come back to you, but let me hear from Bo. Bo, what's your story? What's your story? And with everything that we said, do you agree with some of the things? Do they sound familiar? Were they similar to your experience?
Hello? Hello.
Yes.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais parler en français. Please, your microphone. Thank you, dear. Suite à ce que mon frère disait, je me suis posé la question là, qui dans la salle ne fait pas de politique? Levez la main de ceux qui disent ne pas faire de la politique. Presque tout le monde fait de la politique. Pourquoi? Parce que nous voulons changer les lois.
So she says, everyone here is almost involved. Everyone here is involved in politics. True or false, in one way or another? True. Okay. Ça va?
De même, si on avait toute la liste des personnes là et qu'on le publie, ils seront chauds, hein? Tous les présidents vont dire, mais qu'est-ce qu'ils font là? Ils auront tellement peur qu'on s'est vu, parce que nous, on fait de la politique. Et moi, je n'ai pas peur de dire que oui, dans le sens que je veux, je fais de la politique parce que je veux que mon gouvernement, mon président, change les choses. Et c'est pour ça que tout le monde ici fait de la politique. Des fois, on est, vous voyez, on se cache derrière les termes civil society. Oui, c'est vrai. Mais chacun d'ici, que ce soit sur la politique pour les femmes, que ce soit sur la gouvernance, chacun de nous fait de la politique. Et moi, sincèrement, je suis très fière. Parce que je peux, d'égal à égal, parler avec un ministre ou mon président en disant « Voici ce que je propose ». Ce qui est des fois un peu difficile, c'est que en tant que société civile, on nous dit restez juste à parler de ce qui ne va pas et ne proposez rien sur la table. Donc comment on fait? Il faut avoir des idées à proposer et défier nos présidents, nos gouvernements. À peu près dans les 20 années où on était sur la société civile, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Au départ, je pensais qu'il y avait plus de défis. Là, le gouvernement est là et nous, de là, on se défiait. À peu près, il y a eu 10 ans, il y avait le déni de pourquoi on travaille avec le gouvernement. Mais maintenant, je vois que 20 ans après, il est très important pour nous de faire de plus en plus de compromis. Pourquoi je dis ça? Nos gouvernements ont les armées. Ils ont l'argent. Ils ont le système. De notre côté, qu'est-ce qu'on a? On a beaucoup de gens qui veulent bien faire, mais on n'a pas assez pour se protéger nous-mêmes et pour se protéger entre nous. C'est pourquoi l'importance de Baraza. Et je le dis merci encore parce que quand je suis venue, j'ai vu des têtes et je me dis, mon frère n'est pas mort. Celui-là, il était encore vivant. Tel, j'ai entendu qu'il était en 6 mois quelque part où on ne le voyait pas, mais là, il est vivant. Et ça donne de l'espoir de se dire, oui, nous, on fait de la politique, on tient, même si on n'a pas d'argent, même si on n'a pas les militaires, mais on est là. Avec les politiciens, on se dit, il faut juste trouver le milieu des choses. Être société civile, ce n'est pas pour moi être à côté de la plaque et ne pas voir comment on peut collaborer avec les systèmes. Parce qu'il faut changer le système. D'autres ont choisi d'intégrer le système pour le changer. Nous, on peut être hors du système tout en se réclamant faire de la politique. Également, moi, je pense aussi qu'il faut que la peur change de camp. Pendant toutes ces années, il y a des présidents qui mettent même des couches culottes. Des grands-pères, des grands-pères. Pourquoi? Parce que nous, il nous faut avoir cette force pour pouvoir dire mon frère Paul Biya. Il y en a d'autres. Et également, il y a des présidents qui ont des présidents. Mon président est français, qui a un président français. Vous le voyez? Donc le président de mon président va venir à Madagascar et on fait toutes les routes. Et tout le monde est content, alors que mon président a un président à qui il va rendre compte, à son président. Et beaucoup de politiciens en Afrique font ça. Moi, je suis aussi de ceux qui disent il faut être craint. Il faut que les mouvements soient craints. Parce que quand on est craint, le gouvernement a peur de nous et nous respecte. Mais quand on fait encore là, petit, joli, pas trop féroce, on nous bouffe d'un coup. Et c'est pour ça l'importance du réseau. Et finalement, je me suis dit, nos présidents, nos gouvernements, ils ne parlent pas la bouche pleine. Mon président ne parle pas bouche pleine. Mais c'est à nous d'enlever ce qu'ils ont dans la bouche et de les faire parler en invitant vraiment nos réseaux d'être ensemble. Une fois encore, si toute la liste des personnes qui sont dans la salle est publiée, et il y aura beaucoup qui auront peur. Donc mes frères, mes sœurs, on fait de la politique et ça va, on n'a pas peur.
Imbo, let me stay with you for a little bit. Thank you for your honesty, and thank you for owning your choices, to get involved in politics. And you said a lot of very important things, and I see the room agrees. But in your particular experiences with the Party of Intellectuals, and then just Madagascar politics in general, right? Have you got results? Have you seen results when people like you get involved in politics? And what are some of the tangible results that we can refer to and say, because I got involved, because I joined the politics to make a difference, X, Y, Z was achieved?
En novembre de l'année dernière, il y a eu une élection présidentielle à Madagascar. Et on sait tous que tous les présidents ou n'importe quel candidat diront qu'ils sont pour les droits des femmes. Personne ne dira le contraire, que non, on ne veut pas le droit des femmes. Donc, nous avons fait un travail d'1 an et demi pour collecter dans tout Madagascar ce qu'ils voudraient dire à leur président. La question est, si vous voulez quelque chose de fait, qu'est-ce que vous souhaiterez que votre président fasse? Donc la réponse serait, Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais que, voilà. On a eu des milliers de réponses venant de ces femmes. On a trié, et donc on a eu 6 stratégies avec 40 actions concrètes. Par exemple, il faut que les filles ou les jeunes filles qui sont enceintes à l'école, elles restent dans l'école et que le proviseur n'a pas le droit de la virer. C'est quelque chose de très simple. Par exemple aussi, qu'au début de l'année, il faut que dans chaque kit pour les filles, il y ait un kit menstruel. Et ça, c'est l'État qui doit le faire, pas nos sociétés civiles. Donc, on est allé à chaque candidat pour leur présenter la feuille des routes féministes pour les femmes malgaches. Certains ont dit, bon, ça ne nous intéresse pas, mais le président actuel a eu le document. Ce qu'on a fait après, c'est comme je dis, il faut les faire peur. On leur a dit qu'on fait une suivi-évaluation. Et cette année-ci, on va faire le premier suivi-évaluation si notre président et les membres du gouvernement ont pu évoluer sur cette proposition politique. Parce que pour nous, un document comme ça est une stratégie politique et il est très important de savoir ce que la population veut et qu'on peut faire.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you so much, Imbo. I'll come back to you. Gift, I'm coming to you. Now, your situation, sorry, where are we? Okay. Your experience seems very disheartening. From your account, the people haven't said, we're not voting for you, go. Your party hasn't said, you didn't do what you're supposed to do on behalf of the party, so we are done with you. But the state, the system, through the judiciary, which is one of the arms of government, just staged a coup on you, But then I want to come back to you because, again, it seems as though the citizens have also lost interest and trust in your opposition party. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like they have, because there have been situations where there are people like you who maybe started off with good intentions as activists, as people who wanted to go in and effect a change, but they got swallowed by the system. Their egos got the better of them. And so they fell prey to the corruption and became a part of it. They fell prey to the system and now also became a part of the system. I'm sure that even though your party as an entity, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, hasn't said, Gift, we don't want you anymore, there must be people in the party who don't want you because you make them look bad. You are there for the good and they want the system to be rotten so that they can still benefit. So my question there is, is all that true? And if so, then do you think that really being there is necessary if it's going to, in one way or another, taint you or paint you in a way that separates you from your base as a movement organizer?
Thank you very much. I think that the first thing is the mixed characterization of the situation. And I said, in Africa, all these countries are like one big house of terror. Because you ought to understand one thing. Detectors, they use the same manual book all over the continent, right? And the first thing that they do, detectors' role is to make sure that they destroy any authentic and alternative voices. And the Zimbabwean democratic movement, it also is not an exception. And every time when you fight struggles, there's obviously ways to manipulate. There are 5 ways that are popular in our spaces that the regimes either use, it's called SMICE, either sex, money, intimidation, corruption, or execution. So if you are not being trapped by women, you know that money is on the way. If you resist money, you know that they're intimidating you, they're arresting you, they're threatening you. If they're not doing that, and then they are executing you. That's why there's the situation of Thulani Masego in Swaziland. Because they attempted sex, money, intimidation, corruption, and ended up opting for execution. And that's our journey. When I chose this route, I know fundamentally that I might be speaking here today and tomorrow because they've attempted all these other options. So I know without doubt that execution is part of the plan, but you also have to plan ahead. You can't sleep and expect that detectors will leave you. So there are contradictions, I must acknowledge. And I think that for us in Zimbabwe, we're in a moment, the labor movement globally once had what was called the decades of retreat. A moment of reflection, because I think Comrade Briggs did well in characterizing the moment that we're living in, not only in the African continent, but globally. And I think that is, as a moment of reflection, we ought to do the following. 1, we need to build credible alternatives to the existing political platforms in the continent. Why credible? That word is important because it speaks to the values that we've been speaking for our entire life in activism. Secondly, we ought to push back on authoritarian consolidation. And lastly, we ought, I was listening to Comrade Pumi speaking, and then I got to Twitter, I realized that Ramaphosa has appointed Mbolatiana Jonasi to be the special envoy of the US. So you look at the question of deficiency of ideas and substance in our body politic. Why? Because the most credible people are outside the space. They want to watch, they want to predict, they want to analyze, and they want to say, look, we're not going to get there. But you must understand, we have to cross the Rubicon. Because this is a decisive moment in the continent globally. So we have to cross the Rubicon. And by crossing the Rubicon, we will get to understand that this space is a no man's land and ours to occupy. So I'm convinced, but lastly, I want to say that when you cross the Rubicon, there are contradictions. And I don't think there's any movement world over without contradictions, whether it's the left or the center left. Because, I don't speak about the right. But I think that the left and the center, who have their own contradictions, and we have to confront them. That's why we were trained, and that's why there must be cadreship training and development in any political organization, because Sankara talks about this. A soldier without ideological orientation is a potential criminal. So as long as you are not trained, it's easy to be swayed. I can't be hoodwinked to join because of trinkets and trappings of power, because I spent 10 years being grounded as a radical left cadre. So I was prepared for the moment such as this one. Thank you.
All right, Comrade Gift. Very passionate, very beautiful. But my question still remains. So what you've just said, and I mean, you're not wrong. I think we all agree that, you know, the political machinery as we know it, and it's not just an African problem. The machinery must work a certain way. There's the overarching political machinery. Then we have the machinery of each political entity, each political party, right? We all know that. So what I'm saying is, based on what you've said, they've used the tools that they have at hand, this machinery, the propaganda, you know, and then the just muddying your name, creating cults of personality that do not favor your party in this case, and that do not favor you as a representative of the party. And then through that, you now create perception, which moves to become conviction of the people. And because of that, there's disaffection, they don't want to deal with you anymore, right? That's fine. But my question remains, if we know this, that this is how the politics of the day operates, then what makes us think, but to borrow Boniface's metaphor, that the demigods that we are can contend with the gods themselves? What makes us think that? Why then does it become necessary to even dream that because we are well versed in Frantz Fanon and Marxism and fascism and all the isms in politics and political science, that when we go in, it will be different? That's what I want you to come, because we're having a real conversation. By the time we leave here tomorrow, and by the time we finish this conversation, we should all be clear in our minds that this is how we should proceed when it comes to dealing with politics as activists and movements. But you're not convincing me.
Look, I mean, let's use empirical data. Go to countries that had the social movement leading change and handing over, because movements exist. If you look at the experience of the people of Senegal, you look at the experience of the Opto movement, one of the first social movement that we study. When you lead the revolution, use your citizen agency and citizen power, and then say, we are not crossing, right? Look at what empirical data proves. The commitments that are made by the political elites, you hand them political power, you see the feeling of change, everyone is happy, we have removed the detector, as the social movement were demobilizing back to our civic work. The same leader that would have been glorified to occupy this space becomes an asymmetrical reproduction of the exact same sobriquet that we removed. You then realize that the same person got corrupted. Why? Because we took politicians and made them to go there. They have their own objectives, power, power retention. But what social movement are told and activism is that you are going there as service. I knew when I went to parliament that, one, this is not a career choice. That's why I remain in the academy and doing some of the work that I do outside the political organization. Because you ought to know that we are going there as service. So, and that's important.
You're
and
not going there as a professional politician.
No, you can't go. I know that I'm not going to be in political office forever. I already planned my retirement from public office. I don't, because politicians like diapers ought to be changed. There's no debate about that. What is needed is stewardship. You need people with the necessary craft competence, with the necessary credibility, and the necessary thought process to transform the lives of our people.
Thank you. We don't disagree with you, obviously. But my question is, how effective has that model been? We are talking about action. And it's an African problem where we do what we do, it's not yielding the result, and we are still doing it. So I'm asking, and I'll ask you the question that I asked Imbo earlier. in your involvement, and I know it's not just you, it's a whole movement. Young people came together and said, this is our way of also changing our country. And this is the trajectory we are going on to do that. What have the outcomes been? Tangible outcomes. Let's list them.
Yeah, I think that I'm an example of that kind of progress. Because I went there, I couldn't be co-opted. I couldn't join the bandwagon. I mean, offers are there. Everyone knows them. If you ask those comrades from Zimbabwe, they will tell you about the offers that are being given to members of parliament. I had the same option to remain, because before they remove you, they come with the offer. That cars are there, the castle, strawberry dessert is there, the hotel. That offer is there.
But I'm saying in terms of the change.
So
the policies, and then the policies that got, or that would have got the results.
Of course,
what are the
that's the point that I'm making. I mean, in my case, of course, I was removed. But I think that it's a necessary thing, because imagine if out of the 210 members of parliament, we had 30% of the people with the same capacity and credibility going into parliament, even in local authorities, occupying those spaces. I know there would have been meaningful change. I think that you can't go there alone. That's the plea. You can't be alone. You have to carry your comrades with you, the capable people with you, so that together you are able not only to change, but to remind each other that, comrades, this is what we signed for. We are not side-tracking, because we were together in these spaces. Thank you.
All right. I'll leave gifts for now. But must I say that you're a great speaker, a great movement mobilizer, and a great politician from the way you're speaking on this stage. But I'll still come back to you, because I still want you to answer my question later. Yes. I'm moving on, but I want him to just take note. I want the tangible. So I want you to tell us, between this time and this time, even if it wasn't you, my comrades, we achieved this. The government was doing this with regards to maybe agriculture. But because of our involvement in the politics now, we have this, and it's working like that. Those are the kinds of tangibles I want. So I'll come back to you. Boniface. Now, with all due respect, how old are you, Boniface?
I'm old enough. I'm turning 42 this year.
You're turning 42?
Yes.
Okay. So from what I understand, I mean, this is my first time meeting you in person, but reading about you, asking the streets about you, I've learned that you've been in activism for a very long time. So we can call you a veteran activist, okay? Yeah. All right, so I use veteran not to retire you in age, but just to give you the respect for the work that you've done with you and your movement, right? But I'm asking this question, I'm framing the context for my question this way, because for someone like you who had achieved so much with your base, why do you think that people, just didn't want to vote for you? You went in as an independent, and I think it's something that we've seen on the continent generally.
I had a political party.
Yes. Okay, you had a political party. Okay. But it was a political party that was formed, that you formed, aside from if it were Ghana, the NPP and the NDC, right? So you had a political party, and you had the chance to build the philosophy of that party from scratch. And those philosophies, those ideologies, those dreams and aspirations, you crafted them from what you believed your people needed, right? And based on that, you went on the campaign trail. Why do you think that with all of that and with your track record as a veteran activist, people still didn't vote for you? So I know it's a tough question, but I really want us to, this is not for fun.
No, it's not. It's not a tough question. So the assumption you're making here is that we had a free and fair elections. We did not have free and fair elections.
Okay.
The level of support I have in my country, if I ran for president, perhaps I would win. The truth is, the game is rigged against us from the word go. That's why the last time I met you in Nigeria, you're a member of parliament. No, you're not, because it's rigged against you. So, and that's the reason why we must continue to agitate for political power. We must learn from the Egyptian revolution, Tunisian revolution, Sudan revolution, Bangladesh revolution, that the young people organize and they go to the streets. But once there's a bit of leeway, they hand over that power to the politicians. And we must stop from doing that. The thing is, so let me talk about gains. You're asking Gift about what have we gained in the movement. There's high level of consciousness in the country about people's rights. In my country, I organized a protest against land grabbing. Those are our president now, then he was deputy president, was trying to grab a playground, a school playground, to build a parking for his hotel. That's Langata Primary School. We organized a protest, we reclaimed that playground, and because of that one action, 5,000 schools got their land back that had been stolen. So those are gains. Last year there were protests in Kenya, and a lot of people died, and it's unfortunate. But from the protest, some offices were removed. The office of the First Lady, the office of the Deputy First Lady, the office of the Prime Cabinet Minister, CS positions. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of gains. So we should not look at activism and movement as a sprint. It's a marathon, and it continues. So where Changirai left, now there's Gift here, you know. So there's also a problem in the framing of your questions, because you're putting us on the defense and on the same side. Activists in our countries are held to a higher level of accountability than politicians. We don't earn from public money. We are not employed by the public civil service, but we are held on such high grounds than politicians. And the work we do is volunteering, actually. We throw our lives, our hearts away for our countries. The pain and suffering in activism, if I was to go all over again and choose my life, I wouldn't become an activist. I'm serious. Because it's the mental issues we have. We are all struggling every day. We are struggling to be alive and to stay sane, because you're fighting for Africans and you're fighting for your country, but you have to fight with one hand, because the other hand you're defending yourself from those attacks. And we sit here as well, and you're on our side as well, but the push and push and push and push, you're making us look like the bad person. I'm not Mahama.
No, that's not the intention at all.
No, I'm just saying.
I'm coming at you from the perspective.
I understand.
Let me just contextualize this. Okay. I'm coming at you from the perspective of media and journalism as well. So let's not forget that angle. All right? Let's not forget that angle.
The problem, even with our media houses, yesterday there was a headline in Kenya, is the Gen Z spirit broken or down? Because already the media is framing us like we have to defend ourselves. Why are we defending ourselves and you don't earn from taxpayers? Why are we defending ourselves for fighting for Kenyans or for Ghanaians or for Nigerians? Why am I on defense in a baraza? You see, I understand you're a journalist and you're coming from a media background, but the problem we have is that all the time we have to be on our defense. You can't have your hair down any day because you're going to be on the bad side. You can't be human. He said about get scandalized. An activist can't have a sex scandal, but a politician can sleep with all the women in the world or all the men in the world, and they're not scandalized. But I'm scandalized. Why am I not human? So let's not put ourselves on our defense. Thank you.
Okay. Boniface, I want to stay with you briefly. So again, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. Sorry, I don't feel bad. I'm sorry, because we're having a conversation and we need to really get into it, okay? And it's not personal. I'll still give you a hug when we're done. But but this is what it is. You spoke about the fact that the elections were not free and fair, and I want us to interrogate that a bit. You know, first of all, you can again give me, and I know there are other Kenyans in the room. If you have the information, you know, do we know for a fact the figures of how the election was rigged? That's what I want to find out first. You know, do we have those figures? And again, I'm coming from a journalistic perspective, okay? Do we have those figures? That's one. Then following that up, beyond the free and fair conversation, and I'm going to use Ghana as an example here, it's not that people are usually happy to vote for one party or the other in what has become a duopoly, right? What happens is that at any point in time, you are voting against one party. It's like you go and let the other one come. Let's breathe a little and deal with this one. Maybe we'll come back to you when the time comes. Now, what happens a lot of the time in the conscience and the psyche of the voter is that if I go and I vote for the so-called third force, will they actually win? Or should I rather galvanize my vote and let it count to get this one out? So I'm asking, one, in terms of numbers, what was it like in the election in terms of the free, fair, not free, fair rigging, if there was? But also, do you think that that could have been the psyche of the voting populace?
Kenya is about 60 years old, and we have only had one free and fair elections since independence, 2002, when Kenyans voted to remove Kanu and Moi from power, who was a dictator. That's the last time we had a free and fair election. Since that time, every other election has been contested in court, in the streets, people died. So we don't have free and fair elections. And in the last election, which was in 2022, 8 million Kenyans did not vote. They had no reason to vote. So it was also a vote of no confidence to the person who won the elections. And the same applies to Zimbabwe. Changirai won elections in 2008, but he wasn't shown as the president. I think Ghana and Botswana are an exception when it comes to elections.
You think so?
In the sense that a ruling party can lose elections. It's
okay, you're saying in the sense that a ruling party can actually end up losing.
In our country, it doesn't happen.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it was free and fair.
There you go.
No, because we've spoken about political machinery, and I'm not propagating a particular narrative, but I'm saying that behind the scenes, sometimes, and that's why I come back to gift situation, sometimes, even internally, your party people are like, within the factions, you are bad for us. So we'll go and lobby behind the scenes in the opposition's house. We sort ourselves out before the election even comes.
You're truly the devil.
No, but these are the things that happen on our continent, and even beyond the continent. So I just want us to really understand that, and so that when we are making our decisions, we are honest with ourselves. Okay, let me come back to you, Simamkele. You've been quiet for a while. Now, I know that, and thank you for talking about all the work that you've done and for really framing, the idea and the action that we have to be involved in politics. We cannot stay away from it. But correct me if I'm wrong, at one point or another, you were involved with the EFF political, is it a party or it's an political party? Okay. What took you in there? Were you an activist before you got in there? What took you in there? And what made you now say you're not getting involved in partisan politics ever again?
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I was involved with the EFF. It's called the Economic Freedom Fighters. And I'm still a supporter of the party. I was a researcher for the party in Parliament. So I just want to contextualize a little bit in relation to economic justice when we are having this conversation, as well as global financial and economic systems and how that they impact the state in Africa. So when in the 80s and the 90s, when our governments were forced to implement the structural adjustment programs by the IMF and by the World Bank, that hollowed the state, that crippled state power in relation to the ability for them to deliver services for its people. So budgets were cut, education was defunded, health was defunded because of these structural adjustment programs. And even today, our governments continue to service more debt than actually invest in education. So I just wanted to just contextualize that in terms of understanding the power of the state and the limitations of the state. Just to answer your question around the economic freedom fighters and where it comes from and the context in which it emerges from. So South Africa is known as one of the most unequal countries in the world. There was a statistic done by Oxfam back in the day that showed that 3 white men own the same wealth as the bottom half of the population. And if you know South Africa's history, from slavery to colonialism to apartheid, you will understand that black people were systematically enfranchised. Land was stolen. The ability for black people to own the means of production was dismantled. Access to education, to jobs, was based on one's color and skin. And so the failures of the post-apartheid democracy in South Africa has been structural and economic. So black people are still in an inferior position. When we speak about key indicators like life expectancy, access to education, access to land and jobs, black people are still in the margins. So that is the context in which the economic freedom fighters rises from. It is the awareness that although we achieved political freedom, we have not necessarily achieved economic freedom. Our mines, our minerals, our resources are still in the hands of a few businesses that stems from the legacy of apartheid. And so the beauty about the EFF is that, first of all, it has reinvigorated the debate and the importance of land justice in South Africa. Because that project, unfortunately, was abandoned in the idea of the Rainbow Nation. Also, the emergence of the EFF comes in a context, you know, when miners in South Africa were gunned down for asking and demanding a basic and decent wages. The EFF also emerges in the context of farmers' protests in the Western Cape, in the Dorrance area in particular, where farmers are paid minor wages when they work day in and day out. It also emerges in a context where education is commodified, and black people still are shut out from the doors of learning. So the EFF is a generational mission, and we've seen in the continent and how it's spread. There's EFF in Namibia, there's a movement in Malawi calling for economic freedom. And
okay,
yes.
So Simamkele, I mean, that's beautiful, and it's great to hear that the EFF is addressing such a grave inequality. That's just not for South Africa, it's for all of Africa in such a way. But then, yes, you've mentioned that you're still a member of the party, a supporter of the party, but why are you no longer in active partisan politics? What informed that decision?
Okay, that's a good question. So for me, the reason why I'm not in active politics, because I believe that each and every one of us as activists, we have our unique purpose and contribution. And I also feel, so now I'm based in the academy, and I feel that education, knowledge production is political. And
Agreed.
when we look at also the history of colonialization, it was also central in the ways in which we teach, in the ways in which we learn. And so education, the academy, is also a site of struggle. And that's why I choose to be embedded in the academy. I just want to also just speak to the issue of co-option of young people in political parties and the importance of having alternative systems outside the party structure. The reason why, for instance, I spoke earlier about the Women's National Coalition and how much it was effective in the lead up of democracy. The problem with the Women's National Coalition, it got disbanded once people entered the gates and the walls of parliament. So women were demobilized in a sense. And when women are demobilized and enter political party structures, they are more accountable to those party political structures instead of the movement that brought them into those spaces. And so as activists, as those who choose to enter political spaces, we must also maintain our movements externally of the party political structure. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I mean, you've sort of summed up what I've been trying us to, to get us to say throughout the conversation, that, can we really and truly and honestly be activists in the true sense of the word, be movements in the true sense of the word, when we have to enter a machinery that's already prefabricated? Will we really be able to have the power to decolonize the power that we so seek to be a part of? That's the question. And please, I need us to think about that. Mbo, let me come to you. Now, I think it was Boniface who mentioned earlier that when you were mobilizing, supporters, everybody came together and you were able to raise $200,000. It was you, Boniface, okay. And opposition did 2 million, if that's even really what the government gave money. Yes, they would. I mean, that's how it works, right? Again, back to the political machinery. But Mbo, my question to you is this. If a veteran activist, someone with such clout and following like Boniface, can now galvanize and say, okay, hey guys, you know what? It's clear that we need to have our own party if we're going to ever truly govern this country the way it needs to be governed, the way we've been fighting for all our lives as activists, right? So that the people really benefit. And then you're able to speak to the base in this way, and they raise $200,000. Can we not come to a place where we are now raising our own funds as activists and movements and still doing the work? Because we are still in a place where it's funding and funding windows, and if you don't spend the money within April to May 2025, then you lose it. So in Ghana we say some quick events so that we can do the work. And then sometimes you don't even get to mobilize the way we'd have liked to because it's a bit rushed. And then now, I don't need to talk about, the elephant in the room, the US aid cuts, and all the other cuts that are going to come because the US is pulling out, they're going back to their pre-World War I policy of isolation, more or less, right? And we were never on the front burner anyway of the American politics. Let's understand that. And we didn't have to be, because they're a sovereign state on their own. And we pushed for independence too, so that we could run our own affairs, right? Kwame Nkrumah said the black man is capable of governing his own affairs. That's what the saying was. That's what he said, right? So if that's the case, can we not use the persuasive power, gather the statistics, put everything together, Mbo, and still get our bases to raise $200,000 plus to do the work that we know needs to be done as movements?
Oui, je suis partagée. Partagée parce que pour le cas de Madagascar, on a fait des levées de fonds. Mais la situation est que 99% de la population vit avec moins d'$1 par jour. Ils vont te donner quoi? Même pour manger, ils n'ont pas. Et puis, les 1%, c'est ceux qui cultivent à ce que les 99% n'aient pas quoi manger. Donc, vous voyez le triangle là mais quand tu n'as pas à manger, que tu ne sais pas comment tu vas vivre aujourd'hui, qu'on ne sait pas si tu seras encore là demain, tu as d'autres choses à penser qu'à faire la révolution. C'est ce que je vois à Madagascar. dans les années 70, il y avait encore ce pouvoir d'achat, mais maintenant on est réduit à une telle misère que survivre est ton quotidien, et que quand on parle de politique, tu te dis juste oui pour ne pas être chopé et disparaître. Donc, c'est là où je me dis, est-ce que les gens devraient faire plus? Pourquoi les gens n'aillent pas dans la rue? On pourrait peut-être, quand on aura 5 $ par jour pour manger d'abord. Mais ça ne veut pas dire aussi que je suis défaitiste. J'y crois, je suis là, mais il faut voir la réalité des choses et ne pas blâmer ceux qui ne peuvent pas parce qu'ils sont juste en train de essayer de ne pas mourir ce soir. C'est pénible, mais c'est là la réalité. Par contre, il y a, on va dire, une petite génération comme moi qui a eu la chance d'aller à l'université, comme des compatriotes ici dans la salle qui ont eu cette chance de pouvoir aller dans des universités internationales, qui ont le devoir de se battre. Donc voilà la situation.
Okay, we're going to wrap up this conversation soon, but Mbo, just to, again, stay with your point very briefly. Does that, I mean, the whole of Africa, we're all dealing with bread and butter issues. All of us. You know, it's the reason why even when certain sectors, you know, and the creative sector is a perfect example. I mean, that sector, you know, you invite somebody to a concert and the first thing is, oh, but have we found the kinky that we are going to eat today? That we are going to listen to music and poetry and watch people dance, you know. There's a general lack of understanding, and of course that also has colonial educational problems that we have to fix, right? But my point is this. Do you think that then we need more, in the spirit of Africa not having borders, African philanthropists, for example, who need to be putting their money where their mouths are, not where their cars and their big houses are? And I'm saying this again because we learn from the systems that exist already. If you take many European countries, you take even the EU as a bloc, you take the US. In the US, what people don't realize is that, yes, there's taxation and all that, but what happens is at the beginning of every fiscal year, philanthropists and the 1%, they will come together and let's say it's roads, maybe 10 billionaires or 10 business owners. They say, you know what, this year we're going to fund the maintenance of roads in 30 states. And they pull their money together, they pull their resources. Somebody's producing the asphalt, somebody has the machinery, somebody has all the labor for that. And then they tell the government, this is what we're going to do for you this year. So they don't even exchange money in terms of, you know, hands, physical cash with the government, but the work is done. And that's why the government always pay attention to them, right? Do we need that kind of thing happening more in Africa, where the philanthropists are dealing with us as movements, and we're saying to them, because we are even seeing it happen in the diplomatic space. Now, people have moved away from straight bilateral diplomacy. And I work a lot in this space, I can tell you, and I'm sure there are some of you here who do as well. It's even gone beyond cultural diplomacy. Now it's people-to-people diplomacy. So the diplomats, the diplomatic entities come in, and they want to deal with the people who are doing the work, which is why we can even now deal with an entire regional economic bloc to fund some of the things that we do, right? So why can't we build our own versions of that as Africans? What do you think about that, Mbo? Supporting each other. So Madagascar may not have, you know, somebody else has more. How can we, is it possible, do you think?
Oui. Ce qu'on fait actuellement, c'est comme je vous disais que l'argent est assez difficile pour que les gens contribuent. Mais actuellement, par rapport à l'organisation Autisme Madagascar, dont je suis la fondatrice, nous sommes à peu près 22 000 familles dans tout Madagascar qui s'entraident à ce qu'il y ait des écoles qui se forment, qu'il y ait des praticiens, etc. Alors, c'est vraiment cette force citoyenne, sociale des parents et des familles qui s'entraident. Sur le plan des droits des femmes, nous avons plus ou moins 500 féministes, hommes et femmes, qui veillent toujours à ce que les activités comme la prise en charge psychologique soient faites. Donc oui, je peux dire oui, la ressource humaine est vraiment quelque chose qui nous permet de vivre malgré que Trump ne donne pas ou qui ne donne pas de financement. Oui, c'est pour ça qu'on dit toujours là, et je suis vraiment contente que malgré qu'il n'y ait pas de fonds, il y a ces gens qui donnent de leur temps, de leur expertise. Un exemple, par exemple, là, il y a des spécialistes en Europe ou en Afrique sur la santé mentale et ils veulent faire des vacances à Madagascar. Au lieu de faire des vacances d'une semaine, ils prennent 3 jours pour faire le diagnostic des petits et après ils vont faire les vacances. Pour vous dire que l'entraide humaine est encore très précieuse et elle nous permet d'avancer. Merci.
A round of applause for my panelists, please, my guests. It seems like everybody feels very heavy. I hope you do, because we're having a heavy conversation. But we're opening the floor now. And I want to start with Yanamar, because you are our comrades from Senegal. You came up earlier. And I know you participated in driving out President Wade, and you know there's more that you intend to do. So do we have a mic that we can get to any of the Yanamar reps? Who wants to speak from Yanamar first? Okay, great.